The pregnancy test fell from Emily's trembling hands, clattering across the marble floor of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, straight toward the polished shoes of the one man she should never have met. Dominic Moretti didn't move. He simply stared at the plastic stick, then at her terrified face, his dark eyes calculating something she couldn't comprehend. In that frozen moment, Emily Carter understood her life had just shattered into pieces she could never put back together. What she didn't know was that the father of her unborn child had stolen millions from this man, and that debt was about to become hers. If you're ready to discover how a desperate woman and a dangerous man became each other's salvation, stay with me until the end. And when you finish, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Emily's story travels across the world. The fluorescent lights of the service corridor buzzed overhead as Emily Carter pushed her cleaning cart past the kitchen's back entrance, trying to become invisible. It was a skill she'd perfected over 3 months of working at Luminosa, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants where a single dinner cost more than her monthly rent. The trick was simple. Keep your head down, move efficiently, and never, under any circumstances, make eye contact with the clientele, especially not on Friday nights, when the restaurant's top floor became something else entirely. Emily had learned not to ask questions about the private elevator that led to the 5th floor, or why certain men arrived without reservations and left without paying. She'd learned to ignore the way the kitchen staff went silent when those particular guests walked through, and how the restaurant's owner, Mr. Castellano, transformed from a jovial host into something harder, colder, more deferential. She'd learned that survival meant minding her own business, but tonight, survival had become exponentially more complicated. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she sprayed cleaner on the brass railing near the service stairs. The pregnancy test in her jacket pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, though it was just a small plastic stick that had destroyed her entire world 3 hours earlier. 2 pink lines. Positive. Unmistakable. She was pregnant with the child of a man who had vanished 6 weeks ago without a trace. Marcus. God. Even thinking his name made her stomach twist with a nauseating combination of longing and rage. Marcus Chen, with his easy smile and expensive watch, who'd swept into her life 4 months ago like a romantic dream. He'd waited for her after her shift, complimented her resilience, asked about her day like her answers actually mattered. For someone who'd spent 2 years cleaning up after people who never saw her face, the attention had been intoxicating. He'd taken her to dinner at places almost as nice as Luminosa. He'd listened when she talked about her dreams of going back to school, of becoming something more than invisible. He'd made her feel seen, valued, important. He'd also, apparently, been a liar and a thief. The first hint of trouble came 5 weeks ago when Marcus canceled their dinner plans, his voice tight with stress she'd never heard before. Something came up at work, he'd said. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. His phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment, the upscale Chelsea loft she'd visited twice, was suddenly empty, cleared out like he'd never existed. Even his social media had vanished overnight. Emily had spent a week convincing herself there must be some explanation, some emergency that had pulled him away. She'd spent another week crying herself to sleep, accepting the obvious truth. She'd been used and discarded by someone who'd never cared about her at all. And now she was carrying his child. Emily leaned against the wall, fighting down a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness and everything to do with pure terror. She had $847 in her bank account. Her rent was $1,200 a month for a studio apartment in Washington Heights that was basically a converted closet. She had no family. Her mother had died 3 years ago, and her father had never been in the picture. No close friends, just work acquaintances who barely knew her name. How was she supposed to raise a baby? The sound of voices from the main dining room pulled her back to the present. She needed to finish the 5th floor before her shift ended at midnight. Mr. Castellano had been explicit. The private dining rooms had to be spotless before morning, no exceptions. Usually the 5th floor was off limits during service, but tonight's guests had apparently canceled at the last minute, leaving Emily free to clean early. Small mercies. She pushed her cart toward the service elevator, fishing the special key card from her pocket. The 5th floor wasn't technically secret. The restaurant's website mentioned exclusive private dining experiences, but everyone who worked at Luminosa understood It was something more, something you didn't talk about, something that kept the restaurant profitable even when normal business was slow. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Emily wheeled her cart inside, swiped the card, and pressed the button for the 5th floor. As the elevator rose, she pulled out her phone and opened her banking app for the 100th time that day, as if the numbers might have magically changed. They hadn't. The elevator chimed again, and the doors opened onto a different world. Where the main restaurant was all warm lighting and rustic Italian charm, the 5th floor was pure modern luxury. Dark hardwood floors, walls covered in expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of Manhattan's glittering skyline. 3 private dining rooms opened off the main corridor, each designed for intimate gatherings where privacy was paramount and money was no object. Emily had cleaned this floor dozens of times, but it never stopped feeling surreal. This was a world so far removed from her own life that it might as well have existed on another planet. She started with the corridor, dusting the art frames and polishing the already spotless floors. Her mind wandered as she worked, spinning through impossible calculations. Maybe she could pick up another job. Maybe she could find cheaper housing. Maybe... The sound of the elevator stopped her mid-thought. Emily froze, her heart suddenly hammering. The 5th floor was supposed to be empty. The cancellation had been confirmed. She glanced at her watch, 10:47 p.m. No reservations were scheduled this late, especially not on a night that had already been cleared. The elevator doors opened. A man stepped out, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. She'd seen important people before. Celebrities, politicians, business moguls who treated Luminosa like their private dining room. But this man was different. He carried himself with an authority that went beyond wealth or fame, a presence that seemed to pull all the air from the corridor. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. His suit was immaculate, clearly custom-made, and probably cost more than Emily made in 6 months. But it was his eyes that truly unsettled her. Dark, penetrating, impossibly alert. They swept the corridor in a single glance, cataloging everything, missing nothing, including her. For a moment that stretched into eternity, those eyes locked onto Emily with an intensity that made her want to disappear into the floor. She recognized him, not personally, but from whispered conversations in the kitchen, from the way the staff's voices dropped when he visited. Dominic Moretti. The man Mr. Castellano treated with a deference that bordered on fear. The man who arrived through private entrances and left through others. The man about whom absolutely no questions were asked. Emily's instinct screamed at her to look away, to become invisible like she'd been trained. But something in his gaze held her frozen, a rabbit caught in the stare of a wolf. "You're the cleaning girl." His voice was deep, measured, with an accent that suggested Italian heritage softened by years in New York. It wasn't a question, but Emily nodded anyway, not trusting her voice. "The floor is supposed to be empty tonight." Still not a question. A statement of fact, delivered with the absolute certainty of a man accustomed to reality, conforming to his expectations. Emily's voice came out as a croak. She cleared her throat and tried again. "The reservation was canceled. Mr. Castellano asked me to clean before morning." Dominic Moretti studied her for another long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he glanced at his watch, a gesture so casual it was almost dismissive. "How long will you need?" 20 minutes? Maybe less? I can come back." "Finish now." He turned toward the middle dining room, clearly expecting his word to be law. Emily exhaled slowly, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Her hands were shaking as she returned to her cart, trying to work as quickly and quietly as possible. The smart thing would be to clean the rooms he wasn't using and get out fast. Don't linger. Don't attract attention. Don't... A phone rang, the sound sharp in the quiet corridor. Through the open door of the dining room, Emily heard Dominic answer. "Yes." A pause. "I'm aware. We'll discuss it tomorrow." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to a tone that made Emily's skin prickle with instinctive warning. "Find him. I don't care where he's hiding. Find him, and make it clear what happens to people who steal from me." The call ended. Emily's hands had gone completely still. She forced them to move, to continue polishing the picture frame in front of her, but her mind was racing. Who was Dominic Moretti looking for? And what would happen when they were found? She was almost finished with the corridor when her jacket pocket buzzed. Emily jumped, nearly dropping her polishing cloth. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and saw a text from Sarah, one of the other cleaners. "Hey, you still here? Want to grab coffee after shift?" Emily started to type a response, but her fingers were clumsy with nerves. The phone slipped from her hand, tumbling through the air in what felt like slow motion. It hit the floor with a crack, and the pregnancy test flew out of her jacket pocket, skittering across the polished hardwood to land directly in front of the dining room door. Time stopped. Emily stared at the small white stick lying on the dark floor, the two pink lines clearly visible even from several feet away. Her brain screamed at her to move, to grab it, to hide it before too late. Dominic Moretti appeared in the doorway, his attention drawn by the noise. His gaze dropped to the pregnancy test at his feet. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then he bent down and picked it up. Emily wanted to run. Every instinct told her to abandon her cart, sprint to the elevator, and never come back. But her legs refused to cooperate, leaving her frozen in place as Dominic examined the test with the same careful attention he might give to a business contract. When he looked up at her, his expression was unreadable. "Yours?" The word came out barely above a whisper. "Yes." "The father?" His tone was conversational, almost casual, but Emily heard something beneath it, something sharp and dangerous. He's gone." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "He left weeks ago. I haven't heard from him. I don't know where." "His name." It wasn't a request. Emily's mouth went dry. Every survival instinct she possessed told her that lying to this man would be a catastrophic mistake. But telling the truth felt equally dangerous, like stepping off a cliff into darkness. "Marcus?" she whispered. "Marcus Chen." The change in Dominic's expression was subtle, just a slight narrowing of his eyes, a barely perceptible tightening of his jaw. But the temperature in the corridor seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Marcus Chen," he repeated slowly, as if testing the name on his tongue. "Chinese-American, about 5'10", athletic build, drives a silver Audi, worked in finance." Emily's heart stopped. You know him?" Dominic's laugh was short and completely devoid of humor. "Know him? Miss Carter, Marcus Chen stole $4.7 million from me 6 weeks ago. He also stole from 3 other families, bringing his total take to somewhere around 18 million. We've been looking for him very, very carefully." The world tilted sideways. Emily grabbed the wall for support, her vision tunneling. I had no idea. I swear I didn't know anything about—" "Sit down before you fall down." Dominic's voice cut through her panic. He gestured to a bench near the elevator. "Now." Emily's legs carried her to the bench automatically, moving without conscious thought. She sank onto the leather cushion, her mind struggling to process what she'd just heard. Marcus was a thief. Not just a thief who'd stolen millions from dangerous people. From this man standing in front of her, watching her with those calculating eyes. "I didn't know," she said again, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "He told me he worked in finance. He seemed normal. Successful, but normal. We only dated for a few months. I never met his friends or family. I thought he was just private." "How convenient for him." Dominic leaned against the wall, his posture relaxed, but his attention razor-sharp. "Tell me everything. When you met, where you went, what he talked about, every detail." Emily's mind raced, trying to organize memories that now felt contaminated, poisoned by this new truth. "We met at a coffee shop near here. He said he'd seen me leaving work and wanted to introduce himself. That was 4 months ago, early May. We started seeing each other a few times a week. Dinner, movies, normal dates. He paid for everything. He seemed generous, attentive." "Where did he take you?" "Restaurants in Chelsea and the Village, mostly. Nice places, but nothing too flashy. He said he didn't like drawing attention." Emily laughed bitterly. "I guess I know why now." "His apartment?" "Chelsea, a loft on 9th Avenue. But when I went back there after he disappeared, it was completely empty. The doorman said he'd moved out overnight." Dominic pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "What did he tell you about his work?" "Not much. He said he was in private equity, managing investments for wealthy clients. He traveled sometimes for meetings. He kept odd hours." Emily paused, a memory surfacing. He always paid cash for everything. I thought it was just a quirk, Some rich people prefer cash, but now you realize he was liquidating stolen assets. Dominic's tone was matter-of-fact, almost educational. Marcus Chen was a financial advisor who had access to several high-net-worth accounts, including ones connected to my business interests. He spent months setting up the theft, creating false trails, establishing escape routes. When he finally moved, he cleaned out everything in a single night and vanished. Emily felt sick. So I was what? A cover story? A prop to make him look normal while he planned his escape? Possibly. Or possibly he was arrogant enough to think he could enjoy his last few months in New York before disappearing. Dominic studied her face. When did you last see him? 6 weeks ago. Early June. We were supposed to have dinner, but he canceled, said something came up at work. That was the last time we spoke. The same night he executed the theft. Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. And you haven't heard from him since? No calls, texts, emails? Nothing. I tried reaching out for a week, then gave up. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. I thought he just got bored with me. I thought I was stupid for believing someone like him could actually care about someone like me. You were a civilian who got caught in the crossfire of something much larger. Dominic pocketed his phone. The question now is what to do about it. Fear spiked through Emily's chest. I told you. I didn't know anything about the money. I'm not involved. I'm just... You're carrying the child of a man who owes me and several other very dangerous people a significant amount of money. Dominic's voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. In certain circles, Miss Carter, debt transfers to family, even unborn family. The corridor spun around Emily. You can't be serious. I'm nobody. I have nothing. I can barely afford rent. What could you possibly... It's not about what you have, it's about what you represent. Dominic moved closer, his presence overwhelming. The people Marcus stole from are not patient or forgiving. When they can't find him, they'll start looking for anyone connected to him. And when they discover he left behind a pregnant girlfriend... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Emily's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, a protective gesture she wasn't even aware of making. So what are you saying? That I'm in danger just for dating him? That my baby... She couldn't finish the thought. I'm saying that you have a very limited window to make some important decisions. Dominic crossed his arms, studying her like she was a complex problem requiring solution. Marcus Chen is dead, by the way. His body was found in a warehouse in Newark 3 days ago. We didn't kill him. The Kowalski family got to him first. Unfortunately, he'd already spent or hidden most of the money by then. The air left Emily's lungs in a rush. Dead. Marcus was dead. The father of her unborn child, the man she'd thought she might love, was dead. I can see you processing, Dominic continued, his tone almost clinical. You're thinking that if he's dead, the debt dies with him, that you can simply disappear back into your invisible life and hope nobody notices. Let me save you some time. That won't work. The Kowalskis know about you. So do the Venturas and the DeLucas. Word travels fast in our world, Miss Carter. By tomorrow morning, every family that lost money will know Marcus Chen had a girlfriend. Some will assume you know where the money is hidden. Others will want to use you as a message, a warning about what happens when you cross certain lines. Emily couldn't breathe. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She was a cleaner, a nobody, invisible to everyone who mattered. How had her life become entangled in something so impossibly dangerous? I don't understand why you're telling me this. Her voice sounded hollow, distant. If I'm going to be killed anyway, why explain it? Why not just... Because I'm offering you an alternative. Emily looked up sharply. Dominic had moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the glittering Manhattan skyline. I'm a businessman, Miss Carter. When I see a problem, I look for solutions that serve my interests. Right now, you represent both a problem and an opportunity. I don't understand. Dominic turned to face her. The other families expect me to handle you. If I do nothing, they'll see it as weakness. If I kill you, I eliminate the problem but gain nothing. However, if I claim you, if I make it clear that you and your child are under my protection, part of my interests, then you become untouchable. Emily's brain struggled to process what he was suggesting. You want to claim me? I want to create a public association between us. You would move into one of my secured buildings. You would appear with me at certain events. In exchange, no one would dare touch you or your child. The pregnancy would be seen as mine, the relationship legitimate enough that harming you would be the same as attacking my family directly. You're talking about me pretending to be your girlfriend. Emily's voice was flat with disbelief. I'm talking about you pretending to be my partner, Dominic corrected. There's a difference. A girlfriend is temporary, disposable. A partner, especially one carrying a child, represents a deeper commitment, one that my world would respect. And what do you get out of this? Emily's survival instincts were finally cutting through the shock. You don't protect people out of kindness. What's in it for you? A slight smile curved Dominic's lips, the first real emotion she'd seen from him. Intelligent question. What I get is a solution to a different problem entirely. There are people in my world who see me as a target because I'm unmarried, without clear heirs, potentially vulnerable. A public relationship, especially one producing a child, changes that perception. It suggests stability, future planning, reduced risk-taking. It makes me a less attractive target for ambitious rivals. So I'd be a prop. Again, bitterness edged Emily's words. You'd be a protected woman raising a child in safety rather than a target being hunted by people who would kill you without hesitation. Dominic's voice hardened. I'm not pretending this is a love story, Miss Carter. I'm offering you a practical arrangement that keeps you and your baby alive. In return, you give me the public appearance of domestic stability. Those are the terms. Emily stared at him, her mind reeling. Every instinct screamed that this was insane, that accepting protection from a dangerous man would trap her in a world she didn't understand. But the alternative was what? Going home to her tiny apartment and hoping the people hunting for Marcus's money wouldn't find her? Raising a child while looking over her shoulder every moment, wondering if today would be the day someone decided she was worth killing. I need to think, she whispered. You have until tomorrow morning. Dominic pulled a business card from his pocket and held it out. My private number. Call before 9 a.m. with your decision. If you choose to decline my offer, I'd suggest leaving New York immediately and changing your identity. It won't guarantee your safety, but it might buy you some time. Emily took the card with trembling fingers. The paper felt absurdly normal, just ordinary cardstock with elegant printing. But the weight of what it represented pressed down on her like a physical force. What if I accept and then want to leave later? She had to ask, had to know if this was a cage with no exit. Then we negotiate a different arrangement when the time comes. Dominic straightened his cuffs, a gesture so casual it was jarring. I'm not interested in keeping unwilling participants in my life, Miss Carter, but I would expect certain reasonable terms, primarily that you maintain discretion about our arrangement and that the child's safety remains a priority. The child? Emily's hand moved to her stomach again. You'd really protect a baby that isn't yours? That's the child of a man who stole from you? Something flickered in Dominic's eyes, an emotion too quick to identify. The child is innocent of the father's crimes. And if my protection is the difference between that child living or dying, then yes, I would protect them. Contrary to popular belief, Miss Carter, I'm not a monster. I'm simply a man who operates in a world with different rules than yours. He walked to the elevator and pressed the call button. The doors opened immediately. 9 a.m., he repeated, stepping inside. Choose wisely. The doors closed, and Emily was alone. She sat on the bench for a long time, Dominic's business card clutched in her hand, staring at nothing. Her cleaning cart stood abandoned in the corridor, her phone still lying on the floor where it had fallen. None of it seemed real. This morning she'd been a cleaner who'd just discovered an unwanted pregnancy. Now she was apparently at the center of some criminal intrigue that could get her killed. How had this become her life? Eventually, Emily forced herself to stand. She gathered her phone and the pregnancy test, finished her cleaning on autopilot, and made her way back to the service elevator. The restaurant's main floor was winding down, late diners finishing desserts and coffees. Mr. Castellano caught her eye as she emerged from the service corridor, his expression questioning. Everything all right upstairs? Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. See you tomorrow night. Would she see tomorrow night? Would she still be working here, living her invisible life? Or would she be somewhere else entirely? under the protection of a man she didn't know, pretending to be someone she wasn't? The subway ride to Washington Heights passed in a blur. Emily climbed the 5 flights to her apartment, unlocked the 3 deadbolts she'd installed herself, and stepped into the small space that had been her refuge for 2 years. It wasn't much, a studio barely large enough for a bed, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom that required creative maneuvering. But it was hers, safe, familiar. Except now it wasn't safe at all. Emily sank onto her bed and pulled out Dominic's card. The private number was handwritten below the printed text, elegant script that suggested education and refinement. She thought about the way he'd looked at her, the careful way he'd explained the situation, the almost gentle tone when he'd mentioned protecting her child. He'd also mentioned that Marcus was dead, delivered that information with clinical precision, like reporting the weather. What kind of man offered protection with one hand while operating in a world of theft and murder with the other? Emily's phone rang, making her jump. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, you okay?" Sarah's voice was warm, concerned. "You left without saying goodbye." "Yeah, just tired." The lie came automatically. "Too tired for coffee?" Emily looked around her apartment, at the life she'd built from nothing after her mother died, at the small safe space she'd created for herself. Then she looked at the pregnancy test sitting on her nightstand, at the reality that was about to destroy everything. "Actually, Sarah, I might need to take some time off. Family emergency." "Oh no, is everything all right?" "I'll explain when I can." Another lie, because she could never explain any of this to anyone. "I'll text you, okay?" She ended the call and stared at Dominic's card. 9 a.m. A decision that would determine not just her future, but the future of the child growing inside her. A child who would be born into a world of danger unless she accepted protection from someone equally dangerous. Emily thought about Marcus, charming, lying Marcus, who'd used her and stolen millions and ended up dead in a warehouse. She thought about the families hunting for his money, about becoming a target simply because she'd been foolish enough to fall for a con artist's smile. She thought about her baby, innocent and unknowing, whose entire life hung in the balance of a choice Emily had to make before morning. The night stretched ahead of her, long and sleepless, full of impossible decisions and terrifying possibilities. Emily lay back on her bed, one hand on her stomach, and stared at the ceiling until the first light of dawn began creeping through her window. At 8:57 a.m., she picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. Dominic answered on the first ring. "Miss Carter?" Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every choice that had led her to this moment, and all the choices that would follow from what she said next. "I accept your offer." 3 hours after that phone call, Emily stood in the lobby of a building she'd walked past 100 times without ever imagining she'd enter. The Meridian Tower rose 42 stories above Fifth Avenue, its glass and steel facade reflecting the autumn sunlight like a mirror. She'd always assumed it was corporate offices or luxury condos far beyond the reach of normal people. Now she understood it was both, and something else entirely. "Miss Carter." The doorman's voice was respectful but firm. "Mr. Moretti is expecting you. 38th floor." Emily nodded, her mouth too dry for speech. She'd left her apartment with a single suitcase containing everything that mattered: clothes, her mother's jewelry, the few photographs she'd kept. The rest, cheap furniture, kitchen supplies, books, could stay behind. Dominic had been clear on the phone: bring only what you need, leave no forwarding address, tell no one where you're going. Disappear from your old life completely. The elevator was empty, its walls covered in mirrors that reflected Emily's pale face from every angle. She looked terrified, and there was no hiding it. The numbers climbed steadily: 20, 25, 30, and with each floor her heart hammered harder. What was she doing? Agreeing to live with a stranger, to pretend to be his partner, to enter a world she didn't understand? Staying alive, she reminded herself, keeping her baby safe. The elevator chimed at 38, and the doors opened onto a private vestibule. Only one door stood before her, heavy mahogany, with a discreet security camera above it. Before Emily could decide whether to knock, the door swung open. A woman in her 50s stood in the doorway, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her expression professionally neutral. "Miss Carter, I'm Teresa Valdez, Mr. Moretti's housekeeper. Please come in." Emily stepped into an apartment that redefined her understanding of luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Manhattan, Central Park spreading green and vast to the north. The living room was expansive, yet somehow intimate, furnished with pieces that looked like they belonged in a museum. Art covered the walls. Real art, not prints. And everything from the hardwood floors to the recessed lighting spoke of wealth so profound it didn't need to announce itself. "Your room is this way." Teresa moved down a hallway with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Moretti asked me to get you settled. He'll return this evening." The bedroom Teresa showed her was larger than Emily's entire former apartment. A king bed dominated one wall, flanked by nightstands that probably cost more than her annual salary. French doors opened onto a small balcony. The attached bathroom featured marble surfaces and fixtures that gleamed like jewelry. "If you need anything, there's an intercom panel by the door." Teresa gestured to a small screen. "I'm usually here weekdays from 8 to 6. Mr. Moretti's security team is present around the clock, though you won't see them unless necessary." Emily set down her suitcase, feeling completely out of place. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do." Teresa's expression softened slightly. "For today, settle in, unpack, rest. Mr. Moretti will explain everything when he arrives." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Miss Carter, Mr. Moretti doesn't make offers like this lightly. If he's extended his protection to you, he'll honor that commitment." After Teresa left, Emily sank onto the bed and stared at her hands. Less than 24 hours ago, her biggest worry had been how to afford prenatal care. Now she was living in a Fifth Avenue penthouse, under the protection of a man whose business involved stolen millions and bodies in warehouses. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Dinner at 7. Dress casually. We need to discuss the arrangement, Chad." DM. Emily had nothing that qualified as formal wear anyway. She unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her few dresses in a closet that could have housed a small boutique. The bathroom came stocked with expensive toiletries, and she found herself standing under a rainfall shower that felt like a waterfall, wondering if this was what it felt like to sell your soul. Except Dominic hadn't asked for her soul. He'd asked for appearances, for a public facade that would benefit them both. It should have felt simple, transactional, clear-cut. So why did it feel like she'd stepped off a cliff into freefall? At 7 sharp, Emily emerged from her room wearing the nicest outfit she owned, a simple navy dress she'd bought for her mother's funeral. The apartment's main living area was now lit by the city's evening glow, Manhattan spreading out like a galaxy of lights. Dominic stood by the windows, still in the dark suit from last night, talking quietly on his phone. He noticed her immediately, ending his call with a curt, "Handle it," before turning to face her fully. "You came," he said, as if there'd been doubt. "You didn't think I would? I've learned not to assume anything about people's survival instincts." Dominic gestured to the dining table where 2 place settings had been arranged with food already served. "Sit. You need to eat." Emily's stomach had been in knots all day, but the smell of the food, roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, suddenly made her ravenous. Pregnancy hunger, hitting at the worst possible moment. She sat, and Dominic took the seat across from her, his movements precise and controlled. For a moment they ate in silence, Emily hyper-aware of every sound, every gesture. Finally, Dominic set down his fork and studied her. "We need to establish ground rules," he said. "This arrangement works only if we're both clear about expectations." Emily's hand stilled on her water glass. "I'm listening." "First, your safety is paramount, which means you follow security protocols without question. You don't leave this building without notifying my team. You don't meet with anyone from your former life. You don't discuss our arrangement with anyone outside of people I explicitly approve." The cage was taking shape. Emily forced herself to breathe. "How long does this last?" "Until the child is born and the immediate threats have been neutralized. Minimum 6 months, potentially longer depending on circumstances." Dominic's voice remained even, businesslike. "Second, public appearances. There will be events, dinners, gatherings, where you'll need to appear at my side. You'll be introduced as my partner. Physical contact will be minimal, but occasionally necessary for appearance's sake. A hand on your back, standing close. That sort of thing. Nothing inappropriate." Emily's face heated. She hadn't even thought about the physical aspects of pretending to be someone's girlfriend. "And in private?" "In private, we maintain separate lives. Your room is yours. This is a business arrangement, Miss Carter, not a relationship. Dominic paused, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. However, there is one complication we need to address. What complication? The pregnancy. If we're going to convince people that child is mine, there are certain realities we need to manage. Medical appointments, for instance. I'll need to accompany you to at least some of them. Questions about the timeline of our relationship will come up. We need a consistent story. Emily's mind reeled. You want me to lie to doctors about who the father is? I want you to avoid questions that put you in danger. Dominic's tone sharpened slightly. When people ask how we met, what's your answer? I don't know. Exactly. So here's the story we're using. We met 4 months ago when you were working at Luminosa. I noticed you, asked you to dinner, and we began a discreet relationship. You got pregnant 3 months in, which was unplanned but not unwelcome. We've kept things private because of my business interests, but now we're making it public. Simple, consistent, believable. It was also almost entirely true, except for replacing Marcus with Dominic. Emily felt sick. And when people who worked at the restaurant see me with you, they know we never interacted before last night. The restaurant staff knows to keep their observations to themselves. There was something in Dominic's voice that suggested this wasn't optional. Mr. Castellano has already been briefed. As far as Luminosa is concerned, you quit to focus on your relationship with me. Your coworkers will assume you were discreet about dating a powerful client. It happens more often than you'd think. Emily set down her fork, her appetite vanishing. You've thought of everything. I have to. One inconsistency, one slip, and people start asking questions we don't want to answer. Dominic leaned back in his chair, studying her. This bothers you. The lying. Of course it bothers me. I don't do this. I've never lied about anything important. You're also not accustomed to having your life threatened for someone else's mistakes. Dominic's voice softened fractionally. I understand this isn't easy, Miss Carter, but the alternative is still the same as it was last night. These lies keep you breathing. Emily knew he was right, but that didn't make it easier to swallow. What happens when a baby is born? When people see it doesn't look like you? Genetics are unpredictable. I have Italian heritage. You appear to have mixed ancestry. A child could look like either of us or neither. It's not the concern you think it is. Dominic paused. Unless you're worried about something else? Like what? Like whether I'll actually follow through on protecting a child that isn't biologically mine. His eyes were intense, reading her with uncomfortable accuracy. You're wondering if this is all a temporary con, if I'll lose interest once the immediate threat passes. Emily looked away, unable to hold that penetrating gaze. Can you blame me? I barely know you. You're asking me to trust you with my life, with my baby's life. How do I know you won't just dispose of us when we're no longer useful? The silence that followed was heavy, charged. When Dominic finally spoke, his voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. 6 years ago, my younger sister Sophia was dating a man named Vincent Caruso. Good family, decent reputation, all the right connections. He got her pregnant, promised to marry her, then disappeared the moment things got complicated. Left her alone to face my father's anger and my mother's disappointment. Dominic's jaw tightened. Sophia lost the baby at 5 months. Stress, the doctor said. But I've always known it was heartbreak that killed it. The baby was innocent, and it paid the price for its father's cowardice. Emily's breath caught. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be reassured. Dominic's eyes locked onto hers. I don't punish children for their parents' failures, Miss Carter. Whatever Marcus Chen was, whatever he did, your baby had no part in that. And neither did you, as far as I can determine. So yes, I will protect that child. Not because it benefits me, but because it's the right thing to do. The raw honesty in his voice cut through Emily's defenses. This wasn't the cold, calculating businessman from last night. This was someone who'd watched his sister suffer, who carried that pain with him. What happened to Sophia? Emily asked quietly. She lives in California now. Married to a software engineer, has 2 kids, runs a successful interior design business. She got her happy ending eventually. Something like satisfaction crossed Dominic's face. Vincent Caruso, on the other hand, had a very different outcome. But that's a story for another time. The implicit threat hung in the air. Emily decided she didn't want to know what had happened to the man who'd abandoned Dominic's sister. "So we have a deal?" Dominic asked. "You follow the security protocols, maintain the public fiction, and in return, you and your baby live safely under my protection?" Emily thought about her tiny apartment in Washington Heights, about looking over her shoulder every day, about raising a child in fear. Then she looked around this beautiful home with its security and resources and the promise of safety. "We have a deal," she said. Dominic nodded once, as if a business contract had been signed. "Good. First order of business. Tomorrow you have a doctor's appointment. Prenatal checkup, full blood work, everything you need. I've arranged for Dr. Sarah Chen at Mount Sinai. She's discreet, excellent, and already briefed on the situation." "You arranged a doctor already?" "I make decisions quickly when necessary. Dr. Chen will handle your prenatal care through delivery. She'll ask questions about your health history, about the pregnancy timeline. Remember the story we discussed?" Emily's head was spinning. This is all happening so fast, because we don't have time for slow. The other families are already asking questions. Dominic's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a frown. "Speaking of which, there's something else you need to know. Tomorrow night, there's a gathering, private dinner, invitation only, hosted by the Venturas. They're one of the families Marcus stole from." Fear spiked through Emily's chest. "And you want me to go?" "I need you to go. This is where we make the relationship public, where we establish that you're under my protection. The Venturas will see you, word will spread, and the immediate threat level drops significantly." Dominic set down his phone. "I won't lie to you. It will be uncomfortable. These people will scrutinize you, ask pointed questions, test whether you're legitimate. But you'll be safe, I guarantee it." "Well, how can you guarantee that? If these people are dangerous, they're dangerous to those without protection. But you'll be at my side, marked as mine, which means touching you would be an act of war against me." Dominic's voice carried absolute certainty. "No one at that dinner will risk that. They may dislike the situation, may resent my claiming you, but they'll respect the boundaries it creates." Emily tried to imagine herself at a dinner surrounded by criminals, pretending to be the girlfriend of a man she'd met barely 24 hours ago. The absurdity of it threatened to overwhelm her. What do I wear? How do I act? What if I say the wrong thing? You wear something elegant but understated. Teresa can help you select something appropriate. You act like a woman who's in a relationship with me, attentive but not servile, present but not attention-seeking. And if you're uncertain about a question, you defer to me. Dominic stood, moving to the window. These people will try to intimidate you. They'll make subtle threats disguised as pleasantries. They'll watch your reactions, looking for weakness. Don't give them anything. I'm not good at hiding my emotions. Then we practice. Dominic turned back to her. Stand up. Emily rose on shaky legs, confused. What are we? We're establishing familiarity. Dominic crossed to her in 3 strides, stopping close enough that Emily had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Tomorrow night, we need to look like a couple who's comfortable with each other. That requires eliminating the fear response you currently have. Emily's heart was racing. I'm not afraid of you. You're terrified. Your pupils are dilated, your breathing is shallow, and you keep shifting weight like you're preparing to run. Dominic's observation was clinical, detached. Understandable, but problematic. If you react to me like this in front of the Venturas, they'll know something's wrong. So what, you want me to pretend I'm in love with you? I want you to pretend you're comfortable with me. There's a difference. Dominic lifted one hand slowly, giving Emily time to process the movement before he gently touched her shoulder. Simple contact. Nothing threatening. Breathe through it. Emily forced herself to stay still, to not flinch away from his touch. His hand was warm through the fabric of her dress, his grip firm but not painful. Good, Dominic said. Now, in public settings, I might put my hand on the small of your back, like this. His hand slid from her shoulder down to her lower back, the touch impersonal yet intimate in its familiarity. Emily's breathing hitched. This felt wrong, practicing fake intimacy with a stranger. But Dominic was right. If she couldn't handle simple touches without panicking, she'd never convince anyone they were actually together. Relax, Dominic instructed. You're rigid as a board. Remember, we've supposedly been together for 4 months. This should feel natural. Nothing about this feels natural. Then fake it better. His voice held a hint of amusement. Acting is a survival skill, Miss Carter. Learn it quickly. They practiced for another excruciating 20 minutes, standing close, walking together with Dominic's hand at her back, sitting side by side on the couch, with manufactured ease. Every touch felt foreign, every moment of closeness, an invasion of personal space Emily had carefully guarded her whole life. But gradually, incrementally, her panic began to recede. Dominic's touch remained professional throughout, his manner businesslike despite the intimacy of the practice. He was teaching her to survive, Emily realized. This wasn't seduction or manipulation, it was training. Better, Dominic finally said, stepping back. You're still tense, but it's manageable. We'll practice again tomorrow before the dinner. Emily sank onto the couch, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical effort. How do you live like this? Constantly performing, constantly calculating every interaction. Practice. Necessity. Survival. Dominic's expression was unreadable. You'll adapt faster than you think. Humans are remarkably resilient when their lives depend on it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of information. Dominic briefed her on the key players she'd meet tomorrow night. The Venturas, their allies, potential rivals. He explained the unspoken rules of their world. Never ask direct questions about business. Never appear too interested in private conversations. Always show respect, but never weakness. By the time Emily retreated to her bedroom at 11, her head was spinning with names, rules, and barely suppressed terror about what tomorrow would bring. She lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile her new reality. Yesterday morning, she'd been invisible, anonymous, safe in her obscurity. Tonight, she was living in a luxury penthouse, preparing to enter a world of dangerous people who could kill her as easily as look at her, all because she'd fallen for the wrong man's lies. Emily's hand moved to her stomach, to the life growing inside her. I'm sorry, she whispered to the baby, who couldn't hear her. I'm sorry your father was a criminal, and your mother was naive enough to trust him. I'm sorry you're being born into this mess. But she wasn't sorry about choosing Dominic's protection. Whatever else he was, he'd been honest with her. He'd offered a clear deal and followed through on every promise so far. Marcus had lied with every breath. Dominic might be dangerous, but at least she knew exactly where she stood. Small mercies, Emily thought, then laughed bitterly at the phrase. Her life had become a place where protection from a mafia boss counted as a small mercy. Sleep came eventually, fitful and full of anxious dreams. Emily woke at dawn to find a message on her phone from Dominic. Doctor appointment at 10 a.m. Car will be ready at 9:30. Dress comfortably. DM, the doctor's appointment was surreal in its own way. Dr. Chen was professional and warm, asking questions about Emily's medical history while carefully avoiding anything that might touch on the complicated situation. The ultrasound showed a tiny form, barely recognizable as human yet, with a heartbeat that fluttered strong and steady. About 8 weeks along, Dr. Chen confirmed. Everything looks healthy. Normal development, no concerns so far. Dominic sat in the corner throughout the appointment, his presence somehow both intrusive and reassuring. When the heartbeat filled the room, Emily saw something flicker across his face, an emotion too quick to name, but unmistakably real. Afterward, in the car heading back to the apartment, Dominic was quiet. Finally, he said, 8 weeks. That timing works with our story. Is that all you think about? Emily couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. How everything fits the narrative? Yes, because that narrative keeps you safe. Dominic turned to look at her. But for what it's worth, congratulations. The baby is healthy. That matters. Something in his tone made Emily's anger deflate. He was trying, in his own controlled way, to be decent about an impossible situation. Thank you, she said quietly, for arranging the appointment. For everything. Dominic nodded, then returned his attention to his phone. The moment of connection already passed. The rest of the day was a flurry of preparation. Teresa helped Emily select a dress for the evening, a deep burgundy number that was elegant without being flashy, expensive without being ostentatious. A stylist appeared at 4 to handle Emily's hair and makeup, transforming her from invisible cleaner to polished partner with practiced efficiency. By 6:30, Emily barely recognized herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked sophisticated, confident, like someone who belonged in Dominic Moretti's world. The illusion was almost perfect. Dominic appeared at 7 sharp, wearing a dark charcoal suit that probably cost more than Emily had made in her entire life. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You look appropriate," he said finally. Emily wasn't sure if that was a compliment or simple observation. "Thank you?" "The car is waiting. Remember everything we discussed. Stay close to me, follow my lead, and don't let anyone see you're afraid." Emily's stomach twisted with anxiety, but she nodded. "I'm ready." She wasn't ready, not even close. But as Dominic offered his arm and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him beside her, Emily realized that ready or not, her new life was beginning now. The elevator descended toward the lobby, carrying her toward a gathering of dangerous people who had every reason to want her dead. And beside her stood the man who'd promised to keep her alive, whether she trusted him or not. The car glided through Manhattan's evening traffic with the smooth inevitability of money and power. Emily sat rigidly beside Dominic in the back seat of the black Mercedes, watching the city lights blur past while her heart hammered against her ribs. Her hand kept moving to smooth the burgundy dress, a nervous habit she couldn't seem to break. "Stop fidgeting," Dominic said quietly, not looking up from his phone. "You'll wrinkle the fabric." Emily forced her hands still, clenching them in her lap instead. "I don't know if I can do this." "You don't have a choice." His tone wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. "We're 5 minutes away. Use that time to get your fear under control." "How am I supposed to do that?" Dominic finally looked at her, his dark eyes assessing. "Remember what I told you about Sophia? About how she faced my father after Vincent left her?" He didn't wait for Emily's nod. She was terrified. But she walked into that room with her head up and her voice steady, because she understood something important. Showing fear to predators is an invitation to attack. These people tonight are predators, Miss Carter. They smell weakness the way sharks smell blood. That's not helping. It should, because you're not weak. Dominic's gaze was intense, penetrating. You survived losing your mother, built a life from nothing, worked jobs that would break most people's spirits, and when you discovered you were pregnant and alone, you didn't fall apart. You kept moving forward. That's strength. Remember it. Emily stared at him, startled by the observation. She'd never thought of her life that way. As strength. It had always just felt like survival, like doing what had to be done because the alternative was giving up. "Thank you," she whispered. The car turned onto a tree-lined street in the West Village, slowing before an elegant brownstone that looked like every other expensive residence on the block. Nothing marked it as special or dangerous, just old money and quiet power. "Final instructions," Dominic said as the driver opened the door. "You're my partner. We've been together 4 months. You're pregnant, which some people already know, so don't try to hide it. You're nervous about meeting this crowd, which is natural and expected. Use that. Let them see you're somewhat intimidated. It makes the relationship more believable. But don't let them see you're terrified. There's a difference." Emily nodded, her throat too tight for words. Dominic stepped out of the car and offered his hand. Emily took it, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip as he helped her onto the sidewalk. His hand moved immediately to the small of her back, the practiced gesture from last night's rehearsal, and guided her toward the brownstone's entrance. The door opened before they reached it, revealing a man in an impeccable suit who could have been a butler or a bodyguard, probably both. He nodded respectfully to Dominic. "Mr. Moretti, Mr. Ventura is expecting you." They stepped into a foyer that reeked of old wealth, crystal chandelier, marble floors, oil paintings that were probably originals. Voices drifted from a room to the left, the polished tones of people accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Emily's heart was in her throat. This was it. No turning back now. Dominic's hand pressed gently against her back, a subtle reminder to breathe, to stand tall. They moved together toward the voices, and Emily felt the exact moment when the room's attention shifted to them. The dining room was smaller than she'd expected, intimate almost, with a table set for 12. 8 people were already present, drinks in hand, conversations pausing as Dominic entered with Emily at his side. An older man, 60s, silver hair, sharp features, detached himself from a cluster near the fireplace, and approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dominic, glad you could make it." His gaze slid to Emily, appraising her with uncomfortable thoroughness. "And this must be the young lady we've been hearing about." "Antonio." Dominic's voice was cordial, but carried an edge of warning. "This is Emily Carter. Emily, Antonio Ventura, our host." Emily extended her hand, grateful when it didn't shake. "Mr. Ventura, thank you for including me tonight." Antonio's handshake was firm, testing. "Please, call me Antonio. Any friend of Dominic's is welcome here." The word friend was weighted with meaning Emily couldn't quite decipher. "Though I must say, Dominic, you've been remarkably quiet about your personal life. We had no idea you were seeing anyone." "I prefer to keep certain things private until they're serious." Dominic's hand remained at Emily's back, a claim of territory. "Emily and I have been together for several months now. I thought it was time to stop hiding." A woman approached from the left. Late 40s, stunning in a way that spoke of expensive maintenance, her eyes calculating. "How romantic. I'm Gabriela Ventura, Antonio's wife. You must tell us everything, dear. How did you two meet?" This was the test. Emily could feel it in the way the room had gone subtly quieter, conversations dimming so people could listen without appearing to. "At Luminosa," Emily said, keeping her voice steady. "I was working there. Dominic noticed me after one of his dinners and asked me out. I thought he was crazy. I mean, why would someone like him be interested in someone like me? But he was persistent." "Persistent is one word for Dominic," Antonio said with a laugh that had edges. "Though I'm surprised our friend here fell for a restaurant worker. No offense intended, of course." "None taken." Emily felt Dominic's hand tighten fractionally on her back, a warning to be careful. "I'm not ashamed of working for a living, Mr. Ventura. Some of us weren't born with advantages." A flicker of surprise crossed Antonio's face. Several people in the room had gone very still. Dominic's voice cut through the tension smoothly. "Which is one of the things I admire about Emily. She understands the value of hard work, of building something from nothing. It's refreshing." "How egalitarian of you," Gabriela said, her tone suggesting this was anything but a compliment. "And now you're living together? Moving quite fast, aren't you?" "When you know, you know." Dominic's casual shrug was masterful. "Besides, circumstances accelerated our timeline somewhat." Gabriela's eyes dropped to Emily's stomach with predatory focus. "Oh? Are congratulations in order?" Emily's face heated, but she lifted her chin. "Yes, we're expecting." The room's energy shifted. Emily felt it like a physical pressure, surprise, calculation, suspicion all swirling together. She forced herself to meet Gabriela's gaze steadily, to not look away first. "Well," Antonio said after a weighted pause. "That is news." "Congratulations indeed, though one might wonder at the timing." "One might wonder at a lot of things," Dominic interrupted, his voice pleasant but carrying steel underneath. "But some questions are impolite to ask directly, Antonio. I'm sure you understand." It was a power play, Emily realized. Dominic establishing boundaries, making it clear that certain lines wouldn't be crossed. Antonio's smile tightened fractionally before smoothing back into place. "Of course. Forgive me. Old habits. I tend to be too direct sometimes." Antonio gestured toward the bar. "Dominic, join me for a drink? I'm sure the ladies can get acquainted." It was a dismissal, a separation of forces. Emily's pulse spiked with panic, but Dominic's hand squeezed her back once, reassurance and instruction both. "Emily doesn't drink because of the pregnancy," Dominic said, "but I'm sure she'd appreciate some sparkling water. Gabriela, would you mind?" He was giving Emily to Gabriela deliberately, Emily realized, throwing her to the wolves but trusting she could handle it, or testing whether she could. "Of course." Gabriela's smile was all teeth. "Come, dear, let me introduce you to the others." Dominic's hand left Emily's back, and suddenly she was alone in a room full of predators, being led toward a cluster of women who watched her approach with varying degrees of interest and hostility. "Ladies, this is Emily Carter, Dominic's new acquisition." Gabriela's word choice was deliberate. "Emily, this is Maria DeLuca, Sophia Kowalski, and Jennifer Chen." Emily's blood froze at the last name, Chen, like Marcus. Was this? No relation to your late boyfriend, dear, Gabriella said, reading Emily's expression with satisfaction. Though it is quite the coincidence, isn't it? Marcus Chen steals from all our families, runs off with millions, and then we discover Dominic Moretti has taken up with the thief's former girlfriend. All very tidy. The other women watched Emily like cats watching a mouse. Maria DeLuca, 40-ish, blonde, coldly beautiful, sipped her wine slowly. One has to wonder what Dominic sees in you. No offense, but you're not exactly his usual type. I wasn't aware he had a type, Emily said, fighting to keep her voice level. Oh, he's had a few relationships over the years. Sophia Kowalski leaned in conspiratorially, her Russian accent thick. Models, mostly. Actresses. Women who look good on his arm at events. You're rather plain by comparison. The insults were designed to provoke a reaction, Emily understood. To make her defensive, angry, vulnerable. She thought about what Dominic had said about showing weakness to predators. I suppose he got tired of beautiful women with nothing to offer beyond their looks, Emily said mildly. Some men eventually want substance over surface. Maria's eyes narrowed. Careful, dear. That sounds almost like you're calling us superficial. I wouldn't presume to know you well enough to judge. Emily accepted the sparkling water Gabriella thrust at her. I'm just saying that Dominic and I connected on a deeper level than physical attraction. He values different things than he used to. How convenient for you. Jennifer Chen finally spoke, her voice quiet but sharp. Tell me, Emily, when exactly did you discover you were pregnant? Before or after Marcus disappeared? The question was a trap. Emily could feel it. If she said before, it suggested she'd known Marcus was in trouble and stayed with him anyway. If she said after, it raised questions about why Dominic would take on another man's child. After, Emily said, meeting Jennifer's gaze directly. I found out about 2 weeks after Marcus vanished. I was alone, terrified, and had no idea what to do. That's when Dominic came into my life. How fortuitous, Gabriella murmured. Yes, Emily agreed. Extremely fortunate, because without him, I'd probably be dead right now, which I assume would please some people in this room. The bluntness of it shifted the dynamic. The women exchanged glances, recalculating. Sophia laughed, a genuine sound of surprise. She has spine. I didn't expect that. Neither did I, Maria admitted, studying Emily with new interest. You understand your situation, then? You know what Marcus did, who he stole from? I know he was a thief and a liar who used me as cover while he planned his escape. I know he stole from dangerous people, including Dominic. I know he's dead because of it. Emily's voice didn't waver. I also know I had nothing to do with any of it. I was just someone stupid enough to believe a charming man actually cared about me. And now you're with another dangerous man, Jennifer observed, trading one risk for another. No. Emily shook her head. Dominic's been honest with me from the beginning. He told me exactly what he was offering and what he expected in return. That's the difference. Marcus lied with every breath. Dominic at least respects me enough to tell me the truth. Gabriella's expression had shifted from hostile to speculative. You really believe he'll protect you? That this isn't just temporary until you're no longer useful? Emily thought about the way Dominic had spoken about his sister, about the child she'd lost, about the cold fury in his voice when he'd mentioned Vincent Caruso's fate. Yes, she said simply. I believe him. Then you're either remarkably naive or remarkably perceptive, Maria said. Time will tell which. Across the room, Emily could see Dominic in conversation with Antonio and 2 other men, their heads close together in discussion that looked casual but probably wasn't. He glanced over once, caught her eye, and something like approval flickered across his face before he returned his attention to the men. The dinner bell chimed, saving Emily from further interrogation. The group moved toward the table, and Emily found herself seated between Dominic and a man who introduced himself as Robert DeLuca, Maria's husband. Dominic's hand found hers under the table, squeezing once before releasing, acknowledgement that she'd survived the first test. The meal was elaborate, course after course of expensive food Emily barely tasted. Conversation flowed around her, discussing business and euphemisms and code she didn't understand. Real estate developments that were probably money laundering. Import-export businesses that likely move things other than legal goods. investments that sounded legitimate but carried undertones of threat. Emily ate quietly, speaking when spoken to, trying to be invisible while sitting in plain view. It was a skill she'd honed over years of service work, the art of being present without being intrusive. "So, Emily," Robert said during the third course, his tone conversational, "what are your plans now? Surely you won't continue working at restaurants once the baby comes." "I haven't decided yet," Emily said carefully. "Dominic and I are still figuring things out." "I imagine Dominic will want you focused on the child," Antonio interjected from the head of the table. "A man in his position needs certain stability at home. Can't have the mother of his child working service jobs." It was a test of Dominic's commitment, Emily realized, seeing how he'd respond to implications about controlling her. "Emily makes her own decisions about her career," Dominic said smoothly. "If she wants to work, she works. If she wants to focus on the baby, she does that. I'm not in the business of dictating my partner's choices." "How modern," Gabriella said with barely concealed sarcasm. "How practical," Dominic corrected. "Happy partners make for stable homes. Controlling relationships breed resentment. I prefer the former." The conversation shifted to other topics: politics, sports, mutual acquaintances. Emily felt the attention move away from her with relief. She was making it through. No major mistakes yet. Then Antonio's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression changed. "Excuse me a moment." He stood, walking toward the hallway with his phone to his ear. The table fell quiet, everyone aware that something had shifted. Dominic's hand returned to Emily's under the table, his grip tighter this time. Warning. When Antonio returned, his face was carefully neutral. "Dominic, might I have a word? In private." It wasn't a request. Dominic stood, his hand leaving Emily's. "Of course." He followed Antonio out of the dining room, leaving Emily alone at a table full of people who'd made it clear they didn't trust her. The conversation resumed, but Emily could feel the tension, the waiting quality in the air. She counted the seconds, 60, 90, 2 minutes, then raised voices from the hallway. Not shouting, but sharp, angry. "Cannot be serious, Dominic. The girl is obviously—" "Not your concern, Antonio. I've made my decision. Decision that affects all of us. If you're compromised, I'm not compromised. I'm being strategic. There's a difference." Silence, tense and loaded. Maria leaned toward Emily, her voice quiet. "That doesn't sound good for you, dear." Emily's heart was pounding, but she kept her face calm. "Dominic knows what he's doing." "Does he? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like he's thinking with something other than his brain." Before Emily could respond, the men returned. Antonio's face was flushed with suppressed anger. Dominic's expression was locked down tight, controlled and dangerous. "Apologies for the interruption," Antonio said, his voice strained. "Unexpected business. You understand." "Of course." Dominic's hand landed on Emily's shoulder, possession and protection both. "Actually, we should be going. Early morning tomorrow, and Emily tires easily these days." It was an excuse and everyone knew it, but no one challenged him. The goodbyes were tense, polite words covering hostile undercurrents. Emily shook hands mechanically, smiled at the appropriate moments, and tried not to run for the door. The car was waiting. Dominic handed her inside with careful precision, then slid in beside her. The door closed, shutting out the brownstone and its dangerous inhabitants. For several blocks, neither spoke. Emily's hands were shaking now that the performance was over, adrenaline flooding her system with nowhere to go. "What happened?" she finally asked. "What did Antonio say?" Dominic was silent for a long moment, staring out the window. "He got word that there's video footage from Luminosa's security cameras, from the night you and I supposedly met 4 months ago." Emily's stomach dropped. "But we didn't meet 4 months ago. We met 2 nights ago." "I know." Dominic's jaw was tight. "Antonio's people are trying to get access to that footage to verify our story. If they succeed, they'll see that our entire timeline is a lie. So what do we do?" "The footage is already gone. I had it erased before we ever walked into that dinner." Dominic finally looked at her. "But the fact that Antonio's looking means someone's suspicious. Someone doesn't believe our relationship is legitimate. Which means I'm in danger again. Which means we need to make this more convincing." Dominic's voice was hard. "That dinner was a test, Emily. You passed the first part. You didn't fall apart under pressure. But Antonio and the others are watching closely now. Every interaction, every public appearance, every moment we're seen together will be scrutinized. One slip and they'll know this is a setup. Emily pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. How do we make it more convincing? What else can we possibly do? We move faster than planned. Tomorrow you're moving your medical care to a more visible practice, somewhere the families have connections, where news of your pregnancy and relationship with me will spread naturally. We arrange more public appearances, dinners, events, places where we'll be photographed together. Dominic paused. And we need to be more physically comfortable with each other. The awkwardness between us is noticeable. You want us to pretend to be in love. I want us to pretend to be comfortable. Love is too complicated to fake convincingly, but comfort, familiarity, genuine care, those can be learned. The car pulled up to the Meridian Tower. They rode the elevator in silence, the weight of new complications settling over everything. Inside the apartment, Emily kicked off her heels and sank onto the couch, exhausted. Dominic poured himself a drink, his movements precise and controlled. You did well tonight, he said after a long silence. Better than I expected. I insulted several dangerous women and basically implied they were superficial and stupid. Yes, and they respected you for it. Dominic's lips curved slightly. In our world, false modesty and excessive politeness are seen as weakness. You stood your ground without being aggressive. You showed spine without being openly hostile. That's exactly the right balance. Emily wasn't sure whether to be pleased or horrified. I have no idea what I'm doing. None of us do, really. We just pretend better. Dominic sat in the chair across from her. But we have a problem beyond Antonio's suspicions. What now? There's been chatter. Other families discussing Marcus, the stolen money, whether it's all been recovered. Some people think he had help hiding it. Some think there's still millions out there somewhere. Dominic's eyes were serious, and some think you might know where it is. But I don't. I didn't even know he was a thief until you told me. I know. But perception matters more than truth in this world. If enough people believe you're hiding Marcus's money, they'll come after you to get it. Emily felt the walls closing in. So what do I do? How do I prove I don't have something I never had? You don't prove it. You make yourself too valuable to risk. Dominic leaned forward. Which brings me to what I need to tell you about tomorrow's phone call from Antonio. There's more? He made me an offer, a way to prove your loyalty and innocence. Dominic's voice was carefully neutral. He suggested that if you really didn't know about Marcus's crimes, you'd be willing to help locate the missing money, to cooperate with their investigation. Emily's blood ran cold. Help them? How? By letting them question you, by allowing them access to your belongings, your communications, anything that might contain clues about where Marcus hid his assets. Dominic's gaze was steady. It's a trap, Emily. Even if you tell them everything truthfully, they'll find ways to interpret your answers as suspicious. And if they don't find what they're looking for, some of them will assume you're hiding it. So I can't cooperate. You can't cooperate. Which means we have to give Antonio a different answer. One that makes it clear you're under my protection and therefore off limits for interrogation. Emily understood immediately. Which makes you look like you're protecting a guilty person. Exactly. It puts me in a difficult position politically. Some families will see it as weakness. Others will see it as suspicious. Dominic sipped his drink. But it's still the better option than letting them question you. Why are you doing this? The question burst out of Emily before she could stop it. Taking all these risks, making yourself look bad politically, dealing with all these complications, why not just let them have me? It would be easier for you. Dominic was silent for so long Emily thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost reflective. 6 years ago, I watched my sister fall apart because no one protected her when she needed it most. I watched her lose a child because the man who was supposed to stand beside her ran away instead. I swore then that I would never be that person, never turn my back on someone vulnerable just because protecting them was inconvenient. He met Emily's eyes. You're vulnerable through no fault of your own. Your baby is innocent. Walking away from that would make me the same kind of coward Vincent was. I won't be him. The raw honesty in his voice cut through all of Emily's defenses. This wasn't strategy or manipulation. This was personal conviction, principle forged in the pain of watching someone he loved suffer. "Thank you," Emily whispered, "for being better than him." Dominic stood, setting down his empty glass. "Get some rest. Tomorrow brings new complications, I'm sure. They always do." He walked toward his bedroom, then paused at the hallway entrance. "Emily?" "Yes?" "You asked earlier how we make this more convincing. The truth is, the best way to fake a relationship is to stop pretending it's entirely fake." His voice was carefully measured. "I'm not suggesting we fall in love or become romantically involved, but maybe we stop treating each other like business associates and start treating each other like friends. Partners in the real sense. People who actually give a damn about each other's well-being beyond strategic necessity." Emily stared at him, processing. "You want us to actually care about each other?" "I want us to stop fighting against caring about each other." Dominic's expression was unreadable. "Because whether we intended it or not, your survival is tied to mine now. Your baby's future is connected to my decisions. We're partners in this, Emily. We might as well stop pretending we're not." He disappeared down the hallway, leaving Emily alone with thoughts that spiraled in a dozen directions. She moved to the window, looking out at Manhattan's glittering expanse. Somewhere out there, dangerous people were watching, waiting, planning, looking for weaknesses to exploit, for proof that Emily was lying, for any excuse to take her life. And standing between her and that danger was a man who was himself dangerous, who operated in a world of violence and corruption, but who'd promised to protect her because his sister had once needed protection and hadn't received it. Emily's hand moved to her stomach, to the life growing there. "Your father was a liar and a thief," she whispered. "But maybe, just maybe, the man who's protecting you now is something better, something worth trusting." Outside, the city pulsed with life and light, beautiful and treacherous. And inside the fortified walls of Dominic Moretti's apartment, Emily Carter tried to believe that she might actually survive the mess her life had become. The morning after that conversation, Emily woke to find Dominic already gone. A note on the kitchen counter, written in his precise handwriting, informed her that he had meetings all day but would return by 6. Teresa would be available if Emily needed anything. The tone was businesslike, practical, revealing nothing of the vulnerable moment they'd shared the night before. Emily made herself breakfast, something she was still getting used to, having access to a fully stocked kitchen with food she didn't have to budget for, and tried to settle into some semblance of normalcy. But normalcy felt like a fiction now, a concept from a life she no longer lived. Her phone rang just after 9. An unknown number, local area code. "Hello? Miss Carter." The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "My name is Detective Lisa Morrison, NYPD Financial Crimes Division. I'm calling regarding Marcus Chen. I understand you were in a relationship with him prior to his death." Emily's blood went cold. The police? Of course the police would be involved. Why hadn't she thought of that? Yes, we dated for a few months earlier this year. I'd like to ask you some questions about that relationship. Would you be willing to come down to the station for an interview? Completely voluntary, of course. Nothing about Detective Morrison's tone suggested it was actually voluntary. Emily's mind raced, trying to remember if Dominic had given her instructions about talking to the police. He'd mentioned other families, rival criminals, security protocols. But not this. "I need to check my schedule," Emily said, stalling. "Can I call you back?" "Of course. But sooner would be better than later, Miss Carter. We're trying to close several open cases related to Mr. Chen's activities. I'm sure you want to help bring justice for his victims." The guilt trip was obvious but effective. Emily promised to call back within the hour and immediately dialed Dominic's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight. "What's wrong?" "The police just called. They want to interview me about Marcus." Silence. Then, "Don't agree to anything. What exactly did they say?" Emily repeated the conversation as precisely as she could remember. Dominic's breathing was controlled, thinking. "This is Antonio's doing," he said finally. "He's got someone in the department pushing this, trying to pressure you into talking. If you go in for questioning, anything you say can be twisted, used against you, or leaked back to the families." "So what do I tell them?" "Tell them you need to consult with an attorney before agreeing to any interview. I'm sending someone to the apartment within the hour, Marcus Bellamy, one of the best criminal defense lawyers in New York. He'll handle communication with the police from now on. Emily's hands were shaking. This is really happening. I'm going to need a criminal defense attorney. You're going to have one whether you need him or not. Better to be overprepared than vulnerable. Dominic's voice softened fractionally. Emily, listen to me. This is a pressure tactic. They're trying to scare you into cooperating. Don't let them. Marcus Bellamy will make sure your rights are protected. After the call ended, Emily sat staring at her phone, the weight of her new reality crushing down. She wasn't just hiding from criminals anymore. Now the law itself was circling, looking for someone to blame for Marcus's crimes. The attorney arrived at 10:30, a distinguished man in his 50s with silver hair and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He listened to Emily's story without interruption, taking notes in a leather portfolio. Simple situation, he said when she finished. You dated a man who turned out to be a criminal. You had no knowledge of his activities. You've cooperated with law enforcement to the extent that you can, but you have nothing relevant to contribute to their investigation. I'll communicate that to Detective Morrison and shut down any further attempts to interview you. Just like that? Just like that. Bellamy's smile was thin. The police have no evidence connecting you to Marcus's crimes because there is no connection. They're fishing, hoping you'll say something incriminating or lead them to hidden assets. We're not going to let that happen. He made the call to Detective Morrison right there in Dominic's living room, his tone perfectly calibrated between cooperative and firm. Emily listened to him expertly deflect every question, every request, every subtle pressure tactic. Within 15 minutes, it was done. She'll try again, Bellamy warned as he packed up his portfolio. Different angles, different approaches, but she can't compel you to speak without evidence of wrongdoing, which she doesn't have. Just refer all communication to me and don't engage directly. After he left, Emily felt simultaneously relieved and more trapped. Another wall had gone up around her life. Another layer of protection that was also a barrier to the normal world. Teresa appeared around lunchtime with groceries and news that Dominic had arranged for Emily to attend a charity gala on Friday night. A gala? Emily's voice came out higher than intended. I don't know how to attend a gala. You'll learn. Teresa's tone was matter-of-fact. Mr. Moretti is making a significant donation to the Children's Hospital Foundation. You'll be photographed together, your relationship will be documented in society pages, and people will see you as a legitimate couple supporting legitimate causes. More theater. Everything is theater, dear. The question is whether you're performing or being performed upon. Teresa set down a bag of fresh vegetables. For what it's worth, I've worked for Mr. Moretti for 8 years. I've seen him with other women, socialites, models, women who saw him as a prize to be won. He never looked at any of them the way he looks at you. Emily's heart did something complicated. How does he look at me? Like you're a person, not an accessory. Like your thoughts matter beyond how they reflect on him. Teresa began unpacking groceries with efficient movements. It's different. Whether that's good or bad, time will tell. The rest of the day passed in strange suspension. Emily tried to read, to watch television, to do anything that felt normal, but everything was filtered through the lens of her new reality. Even simple tasks carried weight now. What she wore mattered because she might be photographed. Where she went mattered because she might be followed. Who she spoke to mattered because anyone could be an informant or a threat. Dominic returned at 6:30, looking exhausted in a way Emily hadn't seen before. Lines of tension bracketed his mouth, and his usually precise movements were slightly off, weighted with stress. Rough day? Emily asked as he poured himself a drink. Antonio is pushing back on several business arrangements because of our situation. He's using your presence as leverage, trying to renegotiate terms that were already settled. Dominic downed half his whiskey in one swallow. It's posturing, mostly, but it's costing me time and political capital I don't want to spend. I'm sorry, this is all because of me. This is because of Marcus and Antonio's need to assert dominance. You're just the excuse. Dominic set down his glass and looked at Emily properly for the first time since entering. Bellamy handled the police situation? Yes, he was very efficient. Good, one less immediate problem. Dominic loosened his tie, a gesture that felt oddly intimate in its casualness. We need to talk about Friday's gala. They discussed logistics over dinner. what Emily would wear, how they'd arrive, who would be present, what questions to expect. It was another lesson in performance, in creating the illusion of a relationship that looked effortless to outside observers. "You'll meet my mother that night," Dominic said, and Emily nearly choked on her water. "Your mother? I didn't know she was in New York." "She lives in Westchester, keeps her distance from my business affairs but maintains appearances at major social events." Dominic's expression was carefully neutral. "She'll have questions about you, pointed ones. What does she know about our arrangement?" "Nothing. As far as my mother is concerned, you're my girlfriend. The relationship is genuine, and the pregnancy is mine." Dominic's voice was firm. "She can never know otherwise. My mother is many things, but discreet about family matters isn't one of them. If she suspected this was a setup, she'd say something to someone, and that information would spread." Emily felt the web of lies expanding, encompassing more people, more relationships. What's she like? Intelligent? Traditional? Very concerned with appearances and family reputation? Dominic hesitated. "She won't be cruel to you, but she won't make it easy either. She'll want to understand who you are, where you come from, whether you're worthy of the Moretti name." "I'm a former restaurant worker carrying another man's baby. I'm pretty sure I fail the worthy test. You're a woman who survived hardship with dignity, who works hard, who handles pressure better than people twice your age with 10 times your advantages." Dominic's intensity surprised her. "Don't sell yourself short, Emily. My mother will respect strength. Show her that." The days leading up to Friday passed in a blur of preparation. A stylist appeared to help Emily select a gown for the gala, a deep emerald dress that somehow made her look elegant despite her growing anxiety. Her pregnancy was barely showing yet, just a slight curve that could be attributed to the dress's cut, but Emily was hyper-aware of it constantly. Thursday night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning through everything that could go wrong. Meeting Dominic's mother, facing more scrutiny from dangerous people, maintaining a fiction that felt increasingly complicated. Around 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and padded into the living room. The apartment was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows, casting everything in shades of silver and shadow. She wasn't alone. Dominic sat in one of the chairs facing the windows, a glass of whiskey in his hand, still dressed in the suit pants and white shirt he'd worn to dinner. He looked up as Emily entered, unsurprised. "Can't sleep either?" His voice was quiet, suited to the late hour. "Too much in my head." Emily moved to the window, keeping a respectful distance. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" "About introducing you to my mother? Surprisingly, yes." Dominic took a slow sip of his drink. "She's going to ask difficult questions. She'll want to know how serious this is, whether I'm planning to marry you, what happens after the baby is born. I'll deflect what I can, but she's perceptive. What if she sees through us? Then we deal with it." Dominic's voice carried a fatalistic edge. "But I don't think she will. The fundamental truth that I'm protecting you and the baby is real enough that the rest should read as genuine." Emily turned to look at him, this complicated man who'd entered her life like a hurricane and somehow become its stabilizing force. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. I may not answer." "Why aren't you married already? You're successful, wealthy, from a good family. In your world, I'd think that would make you a prize." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "I've been engaged twice, both times to women my family approved of, women who came from the right background, understood the expectations, would make suitable wives for someone in my position." "What happened?" "I realized I was about to marry someone I didn't actually like very much. Someone I was choosing because they checked boxes on a list, rather than because I wanted to build a life with them." Dominic's laugh was bitter. "Both times I called it off months before the wedding. Both times it caused significant political complications. After the second one, I decided I was done making romantic decisions based on strategy." "But isn't that exactly what this is? Strategy?" "This is different. This isn't about building a dynasty or pleasing my family. This is about keeping someone safe." Dominic met her eyes. "And if I'm being honest, you're more interesting to talk to than either of my former fiancés ever were." Emily felt heat rise to her face. "That's a low bar." "You'd be surprised how many people fail to clear it." Dominic stood, moving to stand beside her at the window. You ask real questions. You challenge things instead of just agreeing. You're scared, but you don't let it paralyze you. That's rare in my world. They stood in silence for a moment, both looking out at the sleeping city. Emily was acutely aware of Dominic's proximity, of the warmth radiating from him, of the strange intimacy of this late-night conversation. "I'm terrified of tomorrow," she admitted quietly. "Of your mother, of the gala, of all the ways I could mess this up." "I know, but you'll do fine." Dominic's voice carried quiet certainty. "You've survived everything else. You'll survive this too." Friday arrived with crystalline autumn clarity, the kind of perfect October day that made New York feel like the center of the universe. Emily spent the morning with Teresa, learning the basics of formal event etiquette, which fork to use when, how to make polite conversation without revealing too much, when to smile, and when to remain neutral. The stylist returned at 4 to help Emily prepare. The emerald dress fit perfectly, clinging to her curves before flowing to the floor in elegant lines. Her hair was swept up in a style that made her neck look longer, more graceful. Makeup transformed her face into something almost unrecognizable. Still her, but polished to a high gloss that belonged in magazine spreads. When she emerged from her room at 6, Dominic was waiting in the living room wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than Emily had made in a year of restaurant work. He looked up from his phone and went very still. "You look beautiful," he said, and something in his voice made it sound less like polite flattery and more like genuine observation. "Thank you." Emily smoothed the dress nervously. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up. You look like you belong at a society gala." "Which is the point." Dominic crossed to her and pulled a jewelry box from his pocket. "One more thing." He opened it to reveal a necklace. Emeralds set in platinum, clearly antique, clearly worth a fortune. "I can't wear that," Emily breathed. "If I lost it or damaged it, you won't. It was my grandmother's. My mother will recognize it, which sends a message about how serious I am about you." Dominic lifted the necklace from its case. "May I?" Emily turned, lifting her hair. Dominic's fingers were warm against her neck as he fastened the clasp, the weight of the emerald settling against her collarbone. When she turned back, his expression was carefully controlled. "Perfect," he said. "Now we look like a couple who belongs together." The gala was held at the Plaza Hotel, its grand ballroom transformed into an elegant wonderland of flowers, candlelight, and Manhattan's wealthiest citizens dressed in their finest. Emily's hand tightened on Dominic's arm as they entered, the sheer scale of the event overwhelming. "Breathe," Dominic murmured. "Smile. You're here as my partner, which makes you untouchable. Remember that." They moved through the crowd, Dominic stopping every few feet to greet someone, to exchange pleasantries, to accept congratulations on his generous donation. Emily smiled and nodded, spoke when spoken to, tried not to stare at the celebrities and power players surrounding them. Then she saw her, a woman in her 60s, elegant in navy silk, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her posture radiating authority and old money. She stood near the bar, watching Dominic with an expression Emily couldn't quite read. "That's your mother," Emily said quietly. "That's my mother." Dominic's voice carried resignation and something like affection. "Ready?" "No." "Good answer. Come on." They crossed the ballroom, and as they approached, the woman's attention shifted to Emily with laser focus. Up close, the family resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same sharp intelligence, the same air of command. "Dominic!" Her voice was cultured, refined, with just a hint of old Italian accent underneath. "You're late." "By 5 minutes, Mama." Hardly scandalous. Dominic bent to kiss her cheek. "I'd like you to meet someone. This is Emily Carter." "Emily, my mother, Isabella Moretti." Isabella's gaze swept over Emily in one comprehensive assessment, missing nothing. Not the emerald necklace, not the slight curve of Emily's stomach, not the nervous tension in her shoulders. "Miss Carter, Dominic has told me absolutely nothing about you, which naturally makes me very curious." Isabella's smile was polite but calculating. "How long have you two been seeing each other?" "About 4 months," Emily said, keeping her voice steady. "We met at a restaurant where I was working." "How interesting." The word was weighted. "And now you're here, wearing Nonna Giuliana's emeralds. My son moves quickly when he wants something." I'm learning that about him. Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing. Walk with me, dear. Dominic, go make your speech to the donors. I'd like to get to know your young lady. It wasn't a request. Dominic shot Emily a look that was equal parts warning and encouragement, then disappeared into the crowd. Emily was left alone with a woman who felt more dangerous than half the criminals she'd met at Antonio's dinner. They walked slowly around the perimeter of the ballroom. Isabella's arm linked through Emily's in a gesture that looked companionable, but allowed no escape. So, Isabella began, you were working in a restaurant. Doing what? Cleaning, service work. Emily saw no point in lying. I worked at Luminosa. And my son, who could have any woman in New York, chose to pursue someone who cleaned restaurants. Isabella's tone was neutral, giving nothing away. Why do you think that is? You'd have to ask him. I'm asking you. What do you think he sees in you? Emily took a breath, remembering what Dominic had said about his mother respecting strength. Honestly, I think he was tired of women who wanted him for his money and status. I didn't know who he was when we met. I didn't care about his wealth or his connections. I just saw a man who seemed interested in me as a person. And now? Now that you know who he is, what his life involves, do you still see him the same way? No, Emily admitted. Now I see him more clearly. The good and the complicated. But I also understand why he needs someone who isn't trying to use him. Isabella was quiet for several steps. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question, but Emily answered anyway. Yes. Is it his? Emily's heart stopped. This was the moment. The lie that had to be perfect. Yes, she said, meeting Isabella's eyes directly. It wasn't planned. We were careful, but not careful enough. When I told Dominic, I gave him an out, told him I'd handle it alone if he wanted. He chose to step up instead. That sounds like my son. Stubborn sense of responsibility. Isabella's gaze was piercing. You're scared, I can see it. But not of Dominic, of something else. I'm scared of this world, Emily said truthfully. I'm scared of making mistakes that could hurt him. I'm scared of not being good enough for what he needs. Finally, some honesty. Isabella stopped walking, turning to face Emily fully. Let me be clear with you, Miss Carter. I don't care that you are a cleaning woman. I don't care that you come from nothing. What I care about is whether you're using my son, whether this baby is a trap to secure your financial future, whether you're the kind of woman who sees a wealthy man and sees only opportunity. The accusation stung, but Emily kept her voice level. I understand why you'd think that, but if I were trying to trap Dominic, I'd have gotten pregnant on purpose instead of by accident. I'd have demanded marriage instead of being terrified when he suggested moving in together. I'd be pushing for more instead of constantly feeling like I'm in over my head. Isabella studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. You've got spine. Good. You'll need it if you're going to survive in my son's life. Does that mean you approve? It means I'm reserving judgment, but I don't disapprove, which for me is practically a blessing. Isabella's expression softened fractionally. One more question. Do you love him? Emily's throat tightened. This was the question she'd been dreading, because the honest answer was complicated, and the simple lie felt wrong. I don't know yet, she said carefully. I care about him. I respect him. I'm grateful for everything he's doing for me and the baby. But love? We're still figuring each other out. At least you're honest about it. Isabella patted Emily's arm. Most women would lie and claim it was true love at first sight. Your uncertainty makes me believe you might actually be genuine. They returned to the main crowd, and Dominic materialized at Emily's side within moments, his hand finding the small of her back. How did it go? He murmured. Your mother is terrifying, but I think I survived. That's about the best outcome possible. Dominic's thumb traced a small circle on her back, a gesture of reassurance or perhaps unconscious comfort. Come on, we need to make the rounds before dinner. The evening blurred into a parade of faces and names, handshakes and polite conversations. Emily smiled until her face hurt, made small talk until her voice felt hoarse, and tried to ignore the way people's eyes lingered on Dominic's hand at her back, on the emerald necklace, on the subtle signs of intimacy between them. During dinner, seated at a table with major donors and their spouses, Emily found herself next to a woman named Catherine, who asked about the pregnancy with genuine warmth. "How far along are you?" "About 8 weeks. Still early." "Oh, that difficult first trimester. Are you managing the nausea?" Catherine launched into a detailed discussion of her own pregnancy experiences, and for a brief moment, Emily felt almost normal. Like she was just a regular woman discussing pregnancy with another woman, not a person hiding a complicated web of lies. Then Catherine's husband leaned over and said, "Your Dominic is quite the catch. You must be thrilled." The possessive "your Dominic" jarred Emily back to reality. This wasn't normal. This was performance. Every moment, every interaction, carefully calibrated to maintain an illusion. "I'm very lucky," Emily said, the words tasting like ash. After dinner, there was dancing. Dominic led Emily onto the floor as a string quartet played something classical and romantic. His hand settled at her waist, hers on his shoulder, and they moved together with the awkward precision of people still learning each other's rhythms. "You're doing well," Dominic said quietly. "My mother pulled me aside earlier, said you have potential." High praise from someone who terrifies me. She terrifies everyone. It's her hobby. Dominic's lips curved slightly. "But she also said you were honest with her. That means something." "I tried to be, as honest as I could be while maintaining the necessary lies. That's all any of us can do." Dominic pulled her fractionally closer as the music swelled. "This is the first time we've danced together. I'm not very good at it. You're doing fine, just follow my lead." They swayed together, the music wrapping around them, the crowd fading into background noise. For a moment, Emily let herself imagine this was real, that she was actually here with someone who cared about her, that the baby she carried was wanted and planned, that her life hadn't become a complicated fiction. Then Dominic's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with a muttered apology, glanced at the screen, and his entire body went rigid. "What is it?" Emily asked, suddenly afraid. "We need to leave. Now." Dominic's voice was tight, controlled, but Emily heard the danger underneath. "Smile like nothing's wrong and walk toward the exit with me." Emily's heart was pounding, but she smiled and let Dominic guide her through the crowd. They made polite excuses, thanked the organizers, and moved toward the lobby with measured casualness that felt agonizingly slow. Once in the car, Dominic's mask dropped. "There's been an incident at the apartment building. Someone tried to bypass security to get to our floor." "What? Who?" "Unknown. Security stopped them, but it means someone knows where you're living and was willing to risk getting caught to get to you." Dominic was already on his phone, issuing rapid instructions to someone. "We're not going back to the apartment tonight. We're going somewhere else, somewhere more secure." Emily's hands were shaking. This is really happening. Someone actually tried to... Yes. And they failed. But we're not taking chances. Dominic's hand found hers, squeezed hard. "I promised you'd be safe. I'm keeping that promise." The car sped through Manhattan, taking turns that suggested evasive driving. Emily watched the city blur past, her beautiful evening transformed into a nightmare in seconds. They ended up at a different building, this one in Brooklyn, its facade unremarkable and easily overlooked. Dominic led her inside, through security that was discreet but intense, up to a top-floor apartment that was smaller than the Fifth Avenue penthouse, but felt more like a fortress. "Safe house," Dominic explained as he checked every room. "Only a handful of people know about this place. We'll stay here until I figure out who tried to get to you and what they wanted." Emily sank onto the couch, still wearing the emerald dress and the antique necklace, feeling like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale into a war zone. Dominic poured them both water, then sat beside her, closer than he normally would. "I need to know you're okay." "I'm not okay. Someone just tried to get to me, to hurt me, or the baby, or..." Emily's voice broke. "This is never going to end, is it? There's always going to be another threat, another attack, another reason to be terrified." "I don't know," Dominic said, and the honesty of it was almost worse than a comforting lie. "But I know I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. That means something." Emily looked at him, this complicated, dangerous man who'd promised to protect her and kept following through even when it cost him. And she realized something that terrified her more than any physical threat. She was starting to trust him, not just strategically, not just because she had to. Actually trust him. The way you trust someone you're building a life with. Thank you, she whispered, for keeping your promises. Dominic's hand covered hers, warm and solid. Always, he said, and Emily almost believed him. They stayed in the Brooklyn safe house for 3 days while Dominic's people investigated the security breach. Emily spent those days in a strange, suspended reality, watching Dominic transform from the controlled businessman she'd come to know into something harder, more dangerous. He was on the phone constantly, his voice dropping into tones that made Emily's skin prickle with instinctive warning. This was the man Antonio Ventura feared, she realized. This was the side of Dominic that operated in shadows and violence. On the second night, he came to her room after midnight, his expression grave. "We found out who tried to get to you," he said without preamble. "Victor Kowalski, Sophia's husband, from the dinner at Antonio's." Emily's blood ran cold. She remembered the Russian woman with the calculating eyes, the casual cruelty in her assessment. Why? Because the Kowalskis lost the most money when Marcus stole from them. Victor became convinced you know where the remaining assets are hidden. He thought if he could get to you alone, apply enough pressure, you'd tell him what he wanted to know. Dominic's jaw was tight. He was wrong about what you know, but right that you'd break under torture. The blunt honesty made Emily's stomach turn. What happens now? Now Victor learns what it costs to come after someone under my protection. Dominic's eyes were dark, dangerous. "I'm calling a meeting. All the families who lost money to Marcus. We're ending this, Emily, one way or another." The meeting was set for the following evening at a neutral location, a private club in Midtown that apparently served as Switzerland for New York's criminal elite. Dominic insisted Emily attend, which terrified her until he explained his reasoning. "They need to see you, need to understand that you're not hiding, not running, not guilty of anything except trusting the wrong man. We're going to put this to rest publicly, or it'll never end." Emily dressed in simple black, no jewelry except the emerald necklace Dominic insisted she wear. "My grandmother's emeralds mark you as mine," he said. "That matters in rooms like this." The club was elegant in an old-fashioned way, all dark wood and leather furniture, the kind of place where powerful men had made decisions that shaped the city for over a century. Emily's hand tightened on Dominic's arm as they entered a private room where 8 people waited. Antonio Ventura sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral. Gabriella beside him, her eyes sharp with speculation. Victor Kowalski, a bull of a man with cold eyes, glared openly at Emily. Sophia sat next to him, her face impassive. The DeLucas, the Chens, and 2 other families Emily didn't recognize filled out the table. "Dominic," Antonio said, "you called this meeting. Explain." Dominic pulled out a chair for Emily before taking his own seat, his body language radiating controlled authority. 3 nights ago, Victor Kowalski attempted to breach my building's security to get to Emily. His intention, based on statements he made to my security team, was to interrogate her about Marcus Chen's hidden assets. "She knows something," Victor growled, his accent thick. "The whore was with him for months. She knows where he hid our money." Dominic's hand slammed down on the table with enough force to make everyone jump. "Call her that again and we'll have a different kind of conversation, Victor. One you won't enjoy." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Victor's face flushed red, but he stayed silent. "Emily had nothing to do with Marcus's crimes," Dominic continued, his voice ice cold. "She was a civilian he used as cover while he planned his theft. She didn't know what he was doing, didn't benefit from it, and has no information about where any remaining assets might be." "So you say." Maria DeLuca leaned forward. "But how do we know that's true? Maybe she's playing you, Dominic. Maybe this whole relationship is her way of staying protected while she accesses the money." "Because I've had her investigated by 3 different firms." Dominic pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "Bank records going back 5 years. Communication logs. Everything. There's no hidden money, no suspicious transactions, no evidence of any connection to Marcus's criminal activities beyond dating him." Antonio picked up the folder, scanning the contents. His eyebrows rose slightly. "This is thorough." "I don't make claims I can't back up." Dominic's voice was steel. "Emily Carter is exactly who she appears to be. A woman who worked service jobs to survive, who trusted a liar, and who got pregnant before discovering the truth. She's not a criminal, she's a victim." A victim you've conveniently taken as your lover, Sophia observed. How touching. A victim I've chosen to protect because she's innocent, and because the child she's carrying didn't ask to be born into this mess. Dominic's gaze swept the table. Every person in this room knows what it's like to have family threatened, to watch innocent people get caught in situations they didn't create. Emily and her baby are those people, and I'm making it clear right now that anyone who threatens them threatens me. The weight of that statement settled over the room. This was the line Dominic was drawing, the declaration of war he was willing to make. You're asking us to let it go, Antonio said slowly. To accept that $4.7 million of your money and $13 million of ours is just gone, lost, written off as the cost of Marcus's betrayal. I'm not asking. I'm telling you the reality. Dominic leaned back in his chair, his posture deceptively casual. The money is gone. Marcus is dead. Punishing Emily won't bring it back. It'll just create more problems, more violence, more complications none of us need. And if we disagree? Victor's voice was a rumble of barely suppressed rage. If we think if we think she deserves to answer for her boyfriend's crimes? Dominic's smile was terrifying in its coldness. Then you and I have a war, Victor. Right here, right now. You come after Emily, I come after you. And we both know how that ends. The room went silent. Everyone present understood what Dominic was offering. Peace, but only on his terms. Protection for Emily in exchange for letting go of the vendetta. Antonio broke the silence. You care about her. Actually care, not just strategically. I can see it. Emily's heart hammered. This was the moment where everything could fall apart, where the fiction they'd built could crumble. Awesome. Yes, then, Dominic said simply. I care about her, and about the child she's carrying, enough to go to war if necessary. Antonio studied them both for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. Well, that's at least honest. He turned to the others. I propose we accept Dominic's position. The Carter woman is off limits. We write off the losses and move forward. You can't be serious, Victor protested. 13 million is already spent or hidden where we'll never find it. Dominic's right about that. Antonio's voice hardened. And starting a war over a woman who probably doesn't know anything is bad business. I vote we let it go. One by one, the other families agreed. Some reluctantly, some pragmatically, but all of them understanding the mathematics of violence. Fighting Dominic would cost more than they'd lost to Marcus. Victor was the last to speak, his jaw clenched with fury. Fine, but if I find out she's lying, if I discover she did know something, you won't, Dominic interrupted. Because there's nothing to find. But I appreciate your agreement to leave her alone. The meeting ended with the kind of tense civility that characterized peace between enemies. As people filed out, Antonio stopped beside Dominic and Emily. You've changed, he said quietly. The Dominic I knew 6 months ago wouldn't have risked this much for anyone. Maybe I got tired of being that person, Dominic replied. Antonio glanced at Emily, something almost like approval in his expression. Take care of him, Miss Carter. He needs someone who sees him as more than just a useful alliance. After everyone left, Emily and Dominic sat alone in the quiet room. The adrenaline was draining from Emily's system, leaving her shaky and exhausted. Is it really over? She asked. The immediate threat, yes. Victor and the others will back off now. You're officially protected. Dominic's hand found hers on the table. But you should know. I wasn't bluffing in there. I meant what I said about going to war if necessary. Why? The question burst out of Emily before she could stop it. Why risk so much for me? We barely know each other. This whole thing started as a business arrangement. When did it become worth fighting a war over? Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing patterns on her hand. I'm not sure I can pinpoint the exact moment. Maybe it was watching you stand up to Gabriella and Maria at that first dinner, refusing to be intimidated. Maybe it was seeing your face when you heard the baby's heartbeat at the doctor's office. Maybe it was all those late-night conversations where you asked real questions instead of just agreeing with everything I said. He met her eyes. Or maybe it was realizing that for the first time in years I actually looked forward to coming home because you were there. Emily's breath caught. Dominic, I'm not asking you to love me, he continued. I know this started as protection, as strategy. But somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real. And I'm not willing to let you get hurt just because the situation is complicated. Emily felt tears prickling at her eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just let me keep protecting you. Let me be there when the baby comes. Let me try to give you and your child the safe future you deserve. Dominic's voice was rough with emotion she'd never heard from him. That's all I'm asking. 3 months passed in a strange new rhythm. Emily's pregnancy progressed, her belly growing rounder as autumn turned to winter. She and Dominic settled into a life that blurred the lines between fiction and reality. They had dinner together most nights, talking about everything from current events to childhood memories. They attended events as a couple, their comfort with each other genuine now rather than performed. Dominic accompanied Emily to every doctor's appointment, his hand holding hers during ultrasounds, his voice asking questions about fetal development with genuine interest. Isabella became a regular presence, appearing at the apartment with baby gifts and unsolicited advice. She'd apparently decided Emily was acceptable, which manifested as a kind of aggressive grandmother-in-training behavior that was both exhausting and oddly touching. The baby needs a proper nursery, Isabella announced one December afternoon, sweeping into the apartment with fabric samples. Not just some corner of a bedroom, a real space. Mama, we've discussed this, Dominic said with the patience of long practice. We're handling it. You're handling it too slowly. The baby comes in 3 months. 3 months, Dominic. Isabella turned to Emily. Tell him you want a proper nursery. Emily, who'd been reading on the couch, looked up with amusement. I want whatever Dominic thinks is appropriate. See, she's sensible. Isabella shot her son a triumphant look, which is why I've already hired a designer. She starts tomorrow. Dominic sighed but didn't argue. Emily had learned that Isabella's pushiness was her way of showing love, of claiming Emily and the baby as family. It was overwhelming but also comforting, filling spaces in Emily's life that had been empty since her mother died. In January, during Emily's 7th month, Dominic came home from a meeting with an unusual expression on his face. What happened? Emily asked, recognizing the look of someone processing significant news. I just closed a deal to acquire a chain of legitimate businesses, hotels, restaurants, real estate development. Dominic set down his briefcase. Completely legal, completely clean. That's good, isn't it? It's a transition, away from the shadier aspects of my work towards something more sustainable. Dominic sat beside her on the couch. I've been thinking about what kind of world I want your baby to grow up in. What kind of example I want to set. And I realized I don't want to be the person who operates in shadows anymore. Emily's heart clenched. You're doing this because of us? I'm doing it because of me. Because I want to be better than I've been. But yes, you and the baby are part of that motivation. Dominic's hand covered her rounded belly, feeling the baby kick. This child deserves a father figure who builds things instead of just protecting territory. Someone who can be proud of how they make their living. You're already more than you give yourself credit for, Emily said softly. Maybe, but I can be better. His eyes met hers. We both can be. February brought a brutal snowstorm that blanketed Manhattan in white. Emily was 8 months pregnant now, moving with the careful deliberation of someone carrying precious cargo. Dominic had become almost comically protective, hovering whenever she stood, insisting she rest constantly, treating her like she might shatter. I'm pregnant, not fragile, Emily protested one evening as he tried to help her to the bathroom for the 3rd time. You're 8 months pregnant with my... Dominic stopped himself. With the baby. That makes you fragile in my book. The slip didn't go unnoticed. Somewhere over the past months, Dominic had started thinking of the baby as his, not biologically, but in every way that mattered. He talked about when the baby comes, and our daughter, with such natural ease that Emily sometimes forgot Marcus had ever existed. The contractions started on a Tuesday morning in early March, 2 weeks before Emily's due date. She was making breakfast when the first pain hit, sharp enough to make her gasp. The second came 10 minutes later. The third, 8 minutes after that. Dominic found her timing contractions on her phone, his face going pale. We're going to the hospital, now. They're still far apart. The doctor said to wait until they're 5 minutes. We're going now. Dominic was already calling for the car, grabbing the hospital bag that had been packed for weeks. I'm not taking chances. The drive to Mount Sinai felt both endless and too quick. Emily breathed through contractions while Dominic held her hand, his usual control fraying at the edges. She'd never seen him nervous before, but he was definitely nervous now. Labor lasted 14 hours. Dominic stayed with her the entire time, letting her crush his hand during contractions, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement, even when Emily cursed him for getting her into this situation. Technically, I didn't get you into this, he pointed out during a brief respite between contractions. That was Marcus. Don't care. You're here, so you get blamed. Emily gritted her teeth as another contraction hit. I hate you right now. That's fair? Huss. Dominic's voice was gentle. Hate me all you want. I'm not going anywhere. At 11:47 p.m., Sophia Rose Carter entered the world screaming her displeasure at the cold, bright hospital room. The nurse placed her on Emily's chest, and everything else faded to background noise. This tiny, perfect person with dark hair and delicate features, whose father had been a criminal and a liar, but who deserved none of that legacy. Emily looked up to find Dominic staring at the baby with an expression of complete wonder. Tears tracked down his face, something she'd never imagined seeing. She's perfect, he whispered. Do you want to hold her? Emily asked. Dominic's hands trembled as the nurse showed him how to support the baby's head, how to cradle her safely. Sophia looked impossibly small in his arms, but she quieted immediately, her tiny face scrunching as she tried to focus on this new person holding her. Hello, little one, Dominic said, his voice breaking. I'm Dominic. I'm going to take care of you and your mama. That's a promise. Emily watched him rock their daughter, because that's what Sophia was now, theirs, regardless of biology, and felt something shift permanently in her chest. This wasn't pretend anymore. This wasn't strategy or protection or convenient fiction. This was family. 2 days later, they brought Sophia home to the apartment, which Isabella had indeed transformed with a nursery that looked like something from a design magazine. The older woman was waiting with enough baby supplies to stock a small store. Let me see my granddaughter, Isabella demanded, and Dominic handed over the baby without protest. Emily watched Isabella coo over Sophia, watched Dominic hover anxiously like a new father, and felt tears streaming down her face. Hormones, she told herself. But it was more than that. The first weeks with a newborn were chaos. Sophia had strong opinions about everything and expressed them at full volume, often at 3 a.m. Emily was exhausted, overwhelmed, certain she was doing everything wrong. Dominic surprised her by being completely hands-on. He changed diapers, handled middle-of-the-night feedings with bottles of pumped milk, walked the floors with Sophia when she wouldn't settle. He approached fatherhood with the same focused intensity he brought to business, reading parenting books, asking the pediatrician detailed questions, learning everything he could about infant care. You're good at this, Emily said one night, watching him burp Sophia with practiced efficiency. I'm learning. There's a difference. Dominic adjusted the baby against his shoulder. But I want to be good at it. She deserves that. 1 month after Sophia's birth, Emily woke to find Dominic sitting in the nursery, holding their sleeping daughter and staring out at the pre-dawn city. Couldn't sleep? She asked softly. Didn't want to miss this, Dominic replied. She changes every day, gets bigger, more aware. I keep thinking about everything I almost missed, all the moments I wouldn't have had if you'd refused my offer that first night. Emily moved to stand beside him, looking down at Sophia's peaceful face. I keep thinking about how terrified I was, how sure I was that this arrangement would destroy me somehow. Are you still terrified? Of the situation? No. You've kept your promises. We're safe, protected, stable. Emily paused. But I'm terrified of something else now. What? Of how much I've come to depend on you. Of how natural this feels, us, as a family. Of what happens if... She couldn't finish the sentence. Dominic stood carefully, placing Sophia in her crib before turning to face Emily fully. If what? If I leave? If I decide this arrangement has served its purpose and I'm done? Yes. Emily, look at me. Dominic's hands came up to frame her face. I meant what I said in that meeting with the families. I care about you, about Sophia. This stopped being an arrangement months ago, and you know it. But we never talked about what it became instead. Then let's talk about it now. Dominic's thumb brushed her cheek. I love you. I love the woman you are, strong and resilient and brave even when you're terrified. I love the mother you've become to Sophia. I love coming home to you, sharing meals with you, watching you figure out this whole parenting thing. And I want to keep doing it, not because of some agreement we made, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. Emily's breath caught. You love me? Completely. Inconveniently. Probably have for months, but was too stubborn to admit it. Dominic's smile was self-deprecating. I know this is complicated. I know we started under the worst possible circumstances, but what we've built together, it's real, Emily. At least it is for me. Emily thought about the past 7 months, about late-night conversations and shared fears, about the way Dominic held her hand during contractions and cried when Sophia was born, about how he'd transformed his entire life, transitioning away from criminal enterprises and toward legitimacy because he wanted to be better for them. It's real for me too, she whispered. I didn't mean for it to happen. I tried to keep distance, to remember this was just protection. But somewhere along the way, you became the person I trust most in the world, the person I want to share everything with, the good and the terrifying and the ordinary. So what do we do about it? Dominic asked. We stop pretending this is temporary. Emily reached up to cover his hands with hers. We admit that what started as fiction became truth, and we figure out what comes next, together. Dominic kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she was something precious. When they pulled apart, both were crying. Marry me, Dominic said. Not for appearances or strategy. Marry me because I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Because I want Sophia to grow up with parents who chose each other. Because I love you, and I want the world to know it. Emily's yes was lost in another kiss, deeper this time, full of promise and hope, and the certainty that they'd found something neither had been looking for, but both desperately needed. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at a church in Westchester, with only Isabella and a handful of close friends present. Sophia slept through most of the vows, waking only to protest the organ music during the recessional. The reception was held at one of Dominic's newly acquired hotels, an elegant affair that mixed Emily's former co-workers from Luminosa with Dominic's business associates and a carefully curated selection of the families they'd navigated together. Antonio Ventura attended with Gabriella, raising a glass in toast. To unexpected love, Antonio said, and to the woman who made Dominic Moretti into someone almost respectable. The crowd laughed, and Emily felt Dominic's hand tighten on hers under the table. She looked at him and saw everything they'd survived together reflected in his eyes, the fear and the danger, and the slow transformation from strangers to partners to family. Almost respectable, Dominic murmured. I'll take it. That night, in their hotel suite with Sophia sleeping peacefully in a bassinet nearby, Emily lay in Dominic's arms and marveled at the impossible journey that had brought them here. What are you thinking? Dominic asked, running his fingers through her hair. That 6 months ago, I was invisible. A cleaner nobody saw, carrying a baby nobody wanted, terrified of everything. Emily shifted to look up at him. And now I'm married to a man I love, raising a daughter we both adore, building a life I never believed I could have. Funny how things work out. Dominic's smile was soft in the dim light. I was so focused on protecting you, on keeping you safe. I didn't realize you were saving me right back. From what? From becoming someone I'd hate. From a life of violence without purpose. From forgetting that there's more to living than just surviving. Dominic kissed her forehead. You gave me a reason to be better, Emily. You and Sophia both. 3 months later, Dominic announced the creation of the Sophia Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping women and children escape dangerous situations. Emily served as its director, using her own experience to shape programs that provided everything from safe housing to job training to legal assistance. The foundation's first major initiative was a partnership with Luminosa and other high-end restaurants to create advancement opportunities for service workers. Emily hired Sarah, her former co-worker, as the program coordinator. You did this, Sarah said, looking around the foundation's new offices. You went from cleaning floors to changing lives. I had help, Emily replied, watching Dominic through the glass wall of his office as he took a business call with Sophia sleeping in a carrier against his chest. A lot of help. The foundation grew quickly, funded by the profits from Dominic's legitimate businesses, and supported by families who'd once threatened Emily but now respected what she'd built. Even Viktor Kowalski made a donation, his way of acknowledging that Emily had been exactly what she claimed, an innocent woman caught in circumstances beyond her control. On Sophia's first birthday, they gathered in the apartment, now completely renovated to accommodate a very mobile baby who was determined to explore everything. Isabella presided over the celebration like a general commanding troops, while Sophia demolished her first birthday cake with enthusiastic destruction. "She's got your determination," Dominic told Emily, watching their daughter smear frosting across her high chair tray. "And your stubbornness," Emily countered. "We're doomed." "Completely." Dominic pulled Emily close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "And I wouldn't change a single thing." Emily leaned back against him, watching Sophia laugh at something Isabella was showing her, surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally. This childhood started as an accident, a complication, a threat to Emily's survival, had become the center of a family neither Emily nor Dominic had known they needed. "Do you ever think about Marcus?" Emily asked quietly. "About how different things would be if he'd been who he pretended to be?" "Sometimes, but then I realized that if Marcus had been genuine, you'd be with him right now. And I'd still be the person I was before. Successful, but empty. Protected, but alone." Dominic's voice was thoughtful. "I can't regret the circumstances that brought you into my life, even if they were terrible at the time." That's a very philosophical way of saying you're glad my ex-boyfriend was a criminal. I'm glad his crimes led you to me. There's a difference. Dominic turned Emily to face him. "What about you? Any regrets?" Emily thought about that terrified woman standing in a restaurant corridor, holding a pregnancy test, facing a dangerous stranger who'd just discovered her secret. She thought about the journey from there to here, the fear and the lies and the slow transformation into something real. "Not a single one," she said, and meant it completely. Years passed. Sophia grew into a bright, willful child who kept both her parents constantly on their toes. The foundation expanded, helping thousands of women and children find safety and new beginnings. Dominic's businesses thrived, his reputation transforming from dangerous criminal to respected businessman and philanthropist. Isabella remained a constant presence, spoiling her granddaughter shamelessly and offering unsolicited advice on everything from Sophia's education to Emily and Dominic's plans for more children. "You should give Sophia a sibling," Isabella announced one Sunday dinner when Sophia was 4. "She's getting spoiled being the only grandchild." "We're thinking about it, Mama," Dominic said with practiced patience. "Thinking isn't doing. At your age, Emily, you shouldn't wait too long." Emily caught Dominic's eye across the table and had to hide her smile. What Isabella didn't know was that Emily was already 2 months pregnant, the news still private between her and Dominic while they enjoyed the secret. This pregnancy was different from the first, planned, wanted, celebrated. When they told Sophia she was going to be a big sister, the little girl's excitement was immediate and loud. "I'm going to teach the baby everything," Sophia announced, "and protect them from bad guys, just like Daddy protects us." Dominic's expression went soft in the way it always did when Sophia reminded him why he'd changed his life. "That's right, sweetheart. We protect our family." On a quiet evening 7 months later, Emily went into labor with their son. Dominic was calmer this time, though no less attentive, holding Emily's hand and breathing with her through contractions. Marco Dominic Moretti was born just after dawn, healthy and loud, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's determined expression. Sophia was allowed to visit that afternoon, approaching her baby brother with careful reverence. "He's so small," she whispered, touching Marco's tiny hand. "I'm going to take care of him forever." "We all will," Emily said, watching Dominic hold their son with the same wonder he'd shown holding Sophia. "That's what family does." That night, after visitors had left and both children were sleeping, Emily and Dominic sat together in the quiet hospital room. Through the window, Manhattan sparkled in the distance. The city where they'd met under impossible circumstances and built something neither had imagined possible. "2 kids," Dominic said, sounding slightly awed. "We have 2 kids now." "We do. And a foundation, and businesses, and a life that looks nothing like either of us expected." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever miss it? The excitement, the danger, the world you used to live in?" "Not even for a second." Dominic's arm tightened around her. This is better than anything I had before. This is real. Emily thought about the invisible cleaner she'd been, working at Luminosa with no future beyond surviving each day. She thought about the terrified woman who'd dropped a pregnancy test at a dangerous man's feet. And she thought about the journey from that moment to this one, full of fear and courage and unexpected love. We saved each other, she said softly. You gave me protection and safety. I gave you a reason to become someone better. And together we built something worth protecting. The best partnership I've ever had. Dominic kissed her temple. Thank you for taking that chance, for accepting my offer when you could have run. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else. Emily's eyes were on their son, sleeping peacefully in his bassinet. Thank you for loving a child that wasn't yours and making her feel like she always belonged. Sophia is mine, Dominic said firmly. Biology doesn't determine family, love does, choice does. And I chose both of you the moment I decided to protect you. Everything else just made it official. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle as dawn approached. Two children sleeping nearby, a future full of possibilities stretching ahead, and the certainty that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. The invisible woman and the dangerous man had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and created the best possible life. It wasn't the story either had planned, but it was the one they'd chosen to write together. And in the end, Emily realized that was the only story that mattered, not where they'd started, but where they'd arrived, and who they'd become along the way.